Hey guys, tonight we're slipping quietly through a marble corridor lit only by flickering oil lamps, the faint scent of crushed laurel and olive smoke hanging in the air. You step carefully over mosaic tiles that feel cool to the touch even in the heat of a Roman summer. Somewhere ahead, behind velvet curtains, the emperor himself is preparing for bed. But don't get too comfortable. You probably wouldn't survive a single night in ancient Rome. What with the assassination attempts, the suspicious figs, and the political backstabbing that doesn't stop just because the sun goes down. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. It's always fascinating to know where this little podcast reaches. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin in the sleeping quarters of Augustus, the first true emperor of Rome, and one of history's most carefully constructed public figures. His bedroom, more modest than you might expect, is draped with soft linens, but nothing ostentatious. His biographers, especially Suetonius, painted a picture of restraint. Augustus, they said, lived like a disciplined soldier, frugal meals, early nights, and early mornings. Yet here, as you pause beside the wide, flat bed, you realize restraint in Rome was a performance too. He sleeps under moonlight, the shutters carved with scenes from Virgil's Aeneid, letting in silver beams that cast ever-changing shapes on the wall. There's no alarm clock, no digital assistant murmuring a to-do list, just the quiet pacing of the night guard outside, and the occasional rustle of papyrus as a slave scrolls through state dispatches by lamplight. Augustus reportedly slept lightly, rarely more than a few hours at a stretch. He often woke up in the middle of the night, whispering instructions to aides, or summoning scribes to jot down thoughts. Whether these were policy breakthroughs, or half-asleep ramblings, we'll never know. One thing is certain, Roman emperors didn't get 8 hours. You'd think, as the most powerful man in the known world, he could at least catch a nap uninterrupted. But even here, behind locked doors among trusted guards, sleep is not safe. The marble statues of gods watch from alcoves, their blank eyes glowing faintly in the lamplight. And Augustus, for all his caution, keeps a dagger beneath his bedframe, just in case. Historians still argue whether Augustus's image of self-discipline was truth or propaganda. Was he truly a man of stoic bedtime habits? Or did he simply want to appear as one to contrast with the decadent republic he replaced? Some suggest his routines were deliberately mundane, a political message broadcast in whispered bedtime stories. On quieter nights, Augustus would stroll through his gardens before bed, his sandals softly brushing dew off the grass. He believed in fresh air, claiming it kept his mind sharp. You walk with him now through hedges trimmed like imperial crests past pools reflecting starlight. The sound of cicadas is oddly soothing, and yet even in this peace danger hums in the background. Augustus's health was never perfect. He feared fevers. He mistrusted certain foods. He even believed some nightmares were omens. That's why in his private rooms incense burned not just for scent, but to ward off evil spirits. His mattress, not feather-stuffed like you might guess. Often it was layered wool, thick and flat, better for posture. You lie down, and it's firmer than expected, with a faint herbal scent, bay leaf perhaps, or myrrh. The emperor's sheets were laundered daily, and no servant handled them without ritual washing. Contamination, physical, political, spiritual, was always a fear. Nearby, in a polished bronze bowl, water ripples gently. A sleep ritual washing the face 3 times, then touching the heart, the mouth, and the temples. It's as much superstition as hygiene. Augustus, a man of omens, believed in the subtle language of the gods. Sometimes he'd invite trusted poets or philosophers to read to him in hushed voices while he drifted off. Imagine that, drifting to sleep with Virgil reciting verses, or Horace composing an ode at your bedside. No YouTube, just lyrical Latin murmurs echoing through a marble villa. But for every poetic lullaby, there were nights of unease. Rome was a city of whispers. Courtiers plotted. Senators grumbled. Augustus knew well the fate of Caesar, his adoptive father. Assassination was not bedtime fiction, it was inherited memory. So he'd lie still, eyes half closed, listening. Always listening. And sometimes when he could not sleep, he would write. His handwriting, steady but compact, fills wax tablets with reminders, edicts, and fragments of thought. One still survives hastened slowly, a philosophy of control even in rest. You stir under his roof now, feeling the pressure of legacy, the weight of marble, the cold glint of power polished daily. You wonder, did he ever sleep without watching the door? Then the soft hoot of an owl cuts through the silence, and Augustus, old and wary, sits up in bed and asks, was that a good omen or a warning? The next door you open leads to a man whose name still echoes like a war drum across history, Julius Caesar. Not technically an emperor, but undeniably the hinge that turned the Republic toward empire. Tonight he's sprawled across a modest bed in a domus overlooking the Forum, and though the stonework is plain, the energy here is sharp. You're walking through a room that never really sleeps. Caesar, the insomniac conqueror. You'd think after a day of speeches, battles, and casual rewriting of laws, the man would collapse into a heap. But nope. According to Suetonius, he famously got by on just 3 hours of sleep a night. You stretch out on his cot, less luxurious than you imagined, and wonder if ambition works better than melatonin. By candlelight, Caesar reads. His left hand holds a scroll filled with complaints from the provinces. The right scribbles quick responses in shorthand. You realize he's probably already on to the next campaign in his mind. Gaul was yesterday. Britain's just over the horizon. Sleep. That's for those not rewriting the calendar. There's a whisper that he preferred to sleep fully clothed, ready for assassination. You reach for a nearby tunic and feel how thick it is, a soft wool laced with hidden weights. The rumors say he even wore armor beneath it on bad nights. Was that paranoia or pragmatism? Historians still argue whether this was Caesar's actual routine or an embellishment by chroniclers who wanted to paint him as heroically tireless. One thing's certain, he needed to appear invincible. In a culture obsessed with masculine control, Caesar couldn't afford to be seen drooling on a pillow. His sleep quarters, like his public image, were curated. The servants walk silently in felt-soled shoes, changing oil lamps before they flicker out. There's a faint smell of spiced wine in the air he liked a cup before bed, laced not with dreams, but perhaps with strategy. And then there's the dreams themselves. One of Caesar's most famous nightmares came shortly before his death. He reportedly dreamed he was flying among the clouds and shaking hands with Jupiter. His wife, Calpurnia's nightmares, however, were more specific. She saw his bloody corpse in the Senate. That contrast, poetic, eerie, and deeply Roman. Tonight, as you watch him recline, his eyes flutter open every few minutes. He listens, not to nightbirds or wind, but to footsteps, real or imagined, in the atrium below. Assassination plots don't sleep, and maybe neither do emperors in waiting. The cot creaks slightly as he sits up, reaching for his stylus again. Maybe he's adding another clause to the Lex Julia. Maybe he's jotting down a name, someone he wants closer or further away. Quirky fact, Caesar once hosted a midnight reading party during his Gallic campaigns. He'd call in generals and poets, forcing them to listen to recitations, and then debate their meanings. Imagine getting summoned to discuss Virgil at 2:30 a.m. after a day of stabbing Gauls. The bed itself is narrow and stiff. He wasn't into softness, at least not in war. And yet a carved figurine of Venus rests on a pedestal nearby, his alleged divine ancestor. Sleep like victory had to be earned, or seduced. You imagine being his servant, tiptoeing around to change his sandals, careful not to make the floor creak. He once had a slave dismissed for sneezing during his evening dictation. The world outside is still. The Forum lies in shadow columns, black against the night sky. But in here, the gears keep turning. Even now, you can feel it. Caesar's mind won't slow. You wonder if he ever dreamed peacefully, or only dreamed of conquest. Did he ever wake laughing from a silly thought, or just with clenched fists ready to argue with the Senate? And then the door creaks slightly open. It's a young aide, pale, nervous. He whispers there's news from Brutus. Caesar blinks. A pause, a smile, let him wait. And then he lies back down, eyes wide open in the dark. You walk quietly now into the villa of an emperor who never really let night fall without some kind of drama. If Augustus slept like a statesman and Caesar like a general, then Nero slept like, well, Nero. His sleeping chamber is cavernous, its ceiling painted with stars that shimmer in oil lamp light. Fragrant smoke curls from censers filled with saffron and cinnamon. But it's not the scent that keeps people awake in this palace, it's the emperor himself. Nero the artist emperor was famously nocturnal. And not just in the poetic, insomniac genius way. He literally performed concerts in the middle of the night, sometimes dragging his court from bed to hear him sing Pluck the Lyre or rehearse scenes from his self-written plays. If you were lucky, you just had to clap politely. If you weren't, well, you might be asked to join the performance. In costume, half asleep. You find yourself now inside a shadowed hall at 2:00 a.m. He's there barefoot in a flowing purple robe, head tilted toward the moonlight, filtering through a stained glass window. A court musician is half dozing on a lyre. A poet is pretending to listen. The guards outside are leaning on their spears. No one dares yawn. Nero's sleep schedule was chaos. He'd stay awake until sunrise composing verses or plotting architectural renovations. Suetonius suggests that his most productive hours began after midnight, which is charming, unless you worked for him, or near him, or were in the general blast radius of his moods. And yet, when he did sleep, Nero required near silence. Slaves had to pad the marble halls with straw mats. Wind chimes were muffled. Even owls, if they perched too close to his bedroom, were said to have mysteriously vanished by dawn. Quirky detail. Nero sometimes traveled with a custom-made sleep tent lined with mirrors so that moonlight would reflect in from every direction. He said it helped him feel watched by the gods even in slumber. Historians still debate whether this was devotional or deeply narcissistic. Tonight, you stand in that mirrored tent. It's oddly calming. The reflections ripple like water. Nero, already reclining on a couch of imported linen, is humming to himself. A servant massages his temples with rose oil. Another fans him gently with peacock feathers. But there's always tension. Because Nero, even in his most peaceful poses, was a man wound tight with delusion and fear. He feared betrayal, obscurity, insomnia, thunder, and sometimes furniture placement. Seriously. He once reportedly restructured his bedroom layout because a dream told him the head of the bed was facing the wrong god. You notice that the bedposts are shaped like griffins, their mouths wide open. You don't ask. The sheets are lavender-scented and absurdly soft, but no one sleeps soundly when they're an emperor who might be murdered by sunrise, or worse, criticized in a bad poem. And what about dreams? There's one recorded tale that Nero dreamed of his own mother Agrippina rising from the sea, eyes blank, hands dripping with seaweed and blood. Interpretations vary: guilt, premonition, bad oysters. Historians still argue whether Nero's madness was sleep deprivation-induced, or whether his sleeplessness was a symptom of something darker. Whatever the cause, his circadian rhythm didn't stand a chance. On some nights, when anxiety peaked, he'd leave his palace entirely roaming Rome in disguise, eavesdropping on citizens or hurling insults at tavern-goers just to feel alive. Then he'd return sweaty and euphoric sleep for 2 hours and demand a symphony by breakfast. Back in his chamber, a bronze bust of Apollo sits beside the bed. Nero believed himself a descendant of the god artist Archer and bringer of plagues. As you lie beside him now, don't worry. Metaphorically, you hear his breathing slow, but never fully stop. His eyes flicker open once every few minutes. The man doesn't trust dreams, or silence, or rest. Eventually, dawn creeps in. The birds begin to sing, and Nero bolts upright, shouting, "Did you hear that harmony? Perfect fourth. Write it down." Tonight, you ascend a cliffside path lit by moonlight and torch flame, winding higher and higher until the dark outline of Villa Jovis looms above. Welcome to Capri, the island refuge of Tiberius Rome's reluctant emperor and possibly its most peculiar sleeper. You step softly across cold limestone floors. The sea murmurs below like a lullaby hummed by Poseidon himself, and the wind whips sharply around columns that open to the edge of a terrifying drop. This is where Tiberius chose to sleep, not in the bustling capital, but in exile, above the clouds. But exile isn't the right word, is it? Tiberius wasn't banished. He left. And here on this jagged rock he built his sanctuary, his fortress, his bed. You're inside now, walking through echoing halls guided by oil lamps held by near-silent attendants. His chamber isn't lush, it's austere. Polished stone, dark drapery, heavy shutters to seal out the roar of the sea. The bed is wide, but not soft. And at its foot, a small reading table littered with scrolls. Tiberius was a man of midnight reading, they say. Not fiction, not poetry. Military records, accounts, histories, sometimes accusations. He slept with Rome's sins unspooling before him in ink. Here's a quirky little fact: Tiberius supposedly invented his own candle timer, a candle with pins stuck at intervals. As the wax melted, pins fell onto metal plates, with a ping marking hours through the night. Imagine waking not to an alarm, but a series of tiny metallic sighs. That's how he counted his dreams. And oh, the dreams. Ancient sources, mostly hostile, claim Tiberius suffered from night terrors. Some say he heard voices whispering behind the walls. Others mention mysterious shadows in the hallway seen only by him. Were these hallucinations superstition guilt historians still debate? Was he mad, or merely misunderstood? Tonight you find him tossing gently under a fur-lined coverlet. The air is salty, and the silence deep. No minstrels, no servants reading aloud. Just the occasional crackle of a torch and the steady thrum of his breath. He believed sleep was when your enemies moved. That rest invited betrayal. You wonder how many nights he faked sleep listening for footsteps. The whispers about his life here are endless. You've probably heard the exaggerated stories, lurid tales about hidden chambers and cruel entertainments. Whether they're true or not, one thing is certain: no one really knew Tiberius. And maybe that's how he wanted it. In the early hours, he would walk the cliffs barefoot, the hem of his robe soaked with dew. Sometimes he'd pause and stare into the dark sea, murmuring Latin verses to no one. Or maybe to the gods, or to ghosts. He once claimed the stars on Capri were brighter than anywhere in the Empire. Maybe that's why he stayed. Out here, he could watch the sky and feel small enough to sleep. Historians often paint him as Rome's haunted ruler, a man of military precision and emotional distance. But lying in his cold bed with the marble pressing against your spine and the sea hissing through cracks in the stone, you get the sense he wasn't cold, just tired. Of people. Of duty. Of pretending. Tonight, as you lie near his chamber, you hear him stir. He gets up, walks to a basin, splashes icy water on his face, and says softly, "Even in sleep, Rome finds you." He dries his hands, returns to the bed, and lies perfectly still. You almost believe he's drifted off, but the candle pings once, and his eyes open again. The air shifts now, drier, brisker, as you step into the leather-scented world of the frontier. Stone gives way to canvas marble, to muddy earth. Tonight, you're sleeping under the stars beside Marcus Aurelius, philosopher, emperor, and reluctant warrior, curled up not in a palace, but in a campaign tent somewhere along the Danube. There are no flutes playing in the distance, no silks, no exotic perfumes. Just the sound of boots in the mud, the occasional snort of a war horse, and the sharp pop of a log in the campfire. You lift the tent flap, careful not to brush against the low beams, and duck inside. Marcus sits there cross-legged on a thick wool blanket wrapped in a soldier's cloak. A wax tablet balances on one knee. His face, lit by lamplight, is creased in quiet thought. This is how he often ended his days, scribbling meditations that weren't meant for anyone but himself. Little notes to his own soul. You watch as he writes, "Be like the cliff against which the waves continually break." And then, with a soft sigh, he tucks the tablet away and lies down, pulling the cloak tighter around him. His bed. A stack of folded cloaks barely cushioned. His pillow. A small roll of leather stuffed with moss. The sleep habits of Marcus Aurelius were stoic to the bone. He believed comfort weakened discipline. Even in Rome, he refused feather beds. When traveling, he slept among his men with little distinction, except perhaps the number of guards hovering nearby. Quirky detail for you, Marcus reportedly refused to use perfumes or sleep with incense, even though they were widely available and popular among the elite. He preferred the smell of the earth horses and wood smoke. To him, it was honest. Tonight you lie beside him. The tent flaps whisper in the wind. Somewhere outside, wolves howl faintly. The Emperor's breathing is deep and slow. But rest isn't easy when you're waging both war and philosophy. Historians still debate whether Marcus Aurelius wrote his most famous meditations while sleepless, kept awake by cold nights, aching joints, and the weight of a crumbling empire. Was his writing a cure for insomnia, or the cause? You feel the ground shift under your blanket as someone walks by outside, maybe a bodyguard, maybe a messenger. Marcus doesn't stir. He's used to footsteps, used to shadows. In the distance, a soldier coughs. A horse stamps its hoof. Then the wind shifts and something new rides in on the breeze snow. You watch as a servant quietly enters with a hot stone wrapped in cloth. He slides it near Marcus's feet, one small indulgence permitted by his physician. But even then, the Emperor barely reacts. He's used to discomfort. He welcomes it like an old friend. You notice his fingers twitch in sleep as though still writing. Maybe he's editing a phrase in a dream. Maybe he's rehearsing what he'll say to his generals tomorrow. There's a phrase he once carved into the wooden edge of his bed frame. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. Not exactly your average bedtime mantra, but then again, Marcus wasn't your average sleeper. Tonight, the stars above are sharp as daggers. You stare at them through a slit in the tent fabric and realize how many decisions were made under these stars by men half asleep, full of doubts, cold to the bone. Marcus shifts once more, and finally his body settles. Outside, a snowflake lands on the tent. Inside, you close your eyes too, knowing that even philosopher kings need rest. You leave the crackling campfires of the frontier behind, and walk now through incense-thick air under a vaulted ceiling painted with angels and crosses. The world has shifted. Rome is older, heavier. And tonight, you're entering the shadowy bedchamber of Constantine the Great, the emperor who dreamed his way into destiny. The corridors of his palace glow faintly from sconces burning perfumed oil. You pass through heavy drapes woven with chiro symbols, step across marble patterned like a chessboard, and finally reach the imperial quarters, a room rich with silence. Constantine doesn't stir. He's not asleep yet, though his robes are off, and his sandals placed neatly by the bed. His head rests on his palm as he stares at the low flame of a candle. The scent of myrrh and rosewater lingers in the air. He's thinking. You already know what about the dream. It came to him on the eve of a crucial battle, the Battle of the Milvian Bridge. In it, he saw a symbol in the sky, a vision of the cross, and heard the words, "In this sign, conquer." The next day, he ordered that very symbol painted on his soldiers' shields. And yes, they won, but tonight it haunts him more than it inspires. You sit quietly nearby, letting the soft rustle of the curtains and distant cooing of doves fill the space. Here's a quirky thing: Constantine had his bed aligned with the rising sun, a deliberate choice meant to reflect divine order. Every morning, the first light of dawn would fall directly on his face like a silent prayer in gold. His mattress is softer than those of the emperors before him. Silk sheets imported from the east, cushions, embroidered with thread dyed from crushed murex shells. Luxurious, yes, but not excessive. He's a man at the crossroads of old gods, and a new one of empire and heaven. A silver basin sits nearby. Before sleep, he dips his fingers, touching his forehead, chest, and shoulders, not in the traditional Roman way, but in something new. A Christian gesture. Quiet, defiant, unofficial. Historians still argue whether Constantine's conversion to Christianity was authentic or tactical. Did he truly believe? Or was it just another armor forged not in bronze, but belief? His sleep rituals suggest sincerity, but then again, in politics, sincerity is often rehearsed. He finally lies back, one arm under his head, the other resting on a wooden cross tucked beside the pillow. He's not afraid of assassins tonight. He's afraid of being wrong. The palace is still. A servant tiptoes in to snuff a flame. You catch a glimpse of his journal filled not with imperial orders, but half-finished thoughts. Fragments of prayers. Doodles of constellations. Names scratched out and rewritten. One name, Helena, his mother, appears several times. Constantine believed dreams were divine messages, and he recorded them obsessively. Some nights he'd wake and summon scribes to capture them before the memory dissolved. One scroll details a dream where he stood barefoot in snow flames rising behind him, and a voice whispered, "Your shadow will not reach the next wall." What did it mean? No one knows. But he had the palace wall torn down the next day. Outside, bells ring softly. Not pagan ones. Church bells. New sounds in an ancient city. Inside, Constantine finally exhales his breathing even now. But sleep doesn't come easily. He opens one eye, watching the shadows dance along the ceiling. His fingers twitch once, then stillness. You wonder, did he ever dream again of that shining cross? Or did he simply keep looking for it behind his eyelids? Tonight, you wander the stone corridors of a palace that smells of cedar and oiled bronze. The mosaics are newer here. The echoes louder as you step into the meticulously arranged sleeping chamber of Hadrian, the emperor architect of Rome. You'd expect the room of an architect-emperor to be practical, but Hadrian's bedchamber is a masterpiece of balanced asymmetry. Columns aren't quite evenly spaced. The ceiling, a gentle dome, is painted to resemble a cloudy sky. And in the center, his bed, a wide, low platform, draped in wool and linen, is framed like a stage. Hadrian is not here. Not yet. He's still soaking in the caldarium, the hottest room of his private bath complex. His nightly routine is rigid soak scrub oil and rest. The steam from the baths clings to his skin like a blanket, relaxing, the muscles tensed from travel and administration. He believed deeply in comfort by design, that sleep, like architecture, must be crafted with care. When he finally arrives in his chamber, wrapped in a deep green robe, his hair still damp, he crosses the room barefoot and pauses by a brazier. The coals glow softly. He adds a pinch of lavender. You notice his sleep kit. Not one object, but a system, an hourglass imported from Alexandria. A glass vial of honeyed wine. A pair of leather sandals with lamb's wool lining, yes, even emperors hate cold feet. And most surprising of all, a traveling pillow. Made of goose down and cedar shavings, it supposedly reminded him of Athens, his favorite city. Hadrian, despite his love for movement, was a man of sleep precision. He needed routine. His guards knew the exact sequence lights dimmed at the third bell. One servant to hum softly from the hallway, and another to gently tap the door every 2 hours to confirm the emperor was still breathing. Quirky note, Hadrian allegedly requested that his bed frame be adjusted every 6 months to account for the body's seasonal weight. Historians still debate if this was a genuine health belief or just classic Hadrian micromanagement. You curl up beside his bed, watching him lie down, spine straight, hands crossed. His breathing is slow, rhythmic, but there's tension beneath the calm. He's haunted, not by enemies or conspiracies, but by memory. Hadrian never truly recovered from the death of Antinous, his beloved companion. Some nights it's said he'd wake calling his name. Others he'd write strange half-poems in the dark only to burn them by sunrise. Tonight he does neither. Instead, he stares at the ceiling for a long time, tracing constellations only he sees. He mutters something in Greek, soft, half prayer, half lament, and turns to his side. Historians still argue whether Hadrian's obsession with design extended into sleep as coping mechanism. Was his need for symmetry a way to impose order on a grief he couldn't express publicly? The room shifts. A cool breeze stirs the curtain. The scent of cedar deepens. You hear faintly the sounds of a flute in another room. He always requested music low and simple, no lyrics. Tonight, it's a Dorian melody, slow as moonlight. Sleep does not come quickly, but eventually his eyes close. The hourglass turns once more, and Hadrian, the emperor who tried to shape the world with brick and love, sleeps under a ceiling he designed, dreaming of a river boy who never returned. Tonight, the walls lean in slightly. You're walking through a palace corridor lined with mirrored marble and thick crimson drapes. Your footsteps softened by a velvet runner. The mood is claustrophobic, not in size but in suspicion. You are inside the private quarters of Domitian, the emperor who feared sleep might kill him. Everything about Domitian's chamber is angular, sharp, and overplanned. The corners are too neat. The bed, immense and square, stands in the center of the room like an altar. There are no windows, just bronze sconces burning nervously, casting shadows that flicker like spies. Tonight, you're about to witness the most paranoid sleeper in Rome. Domitian didn't just have a bodyguard, he had a bed guard. Historians record that he lined his walls with mirror-polished stone so he could spot intruders, or worse, assassins, approaching from any angle. Even his bedroom doors were fitted with hidden panels, so guards could silently monitor him as he slept. You crouch low and peer into the corners. Every torch bracket is spaced evenly. No creaking floorboards. No furniture near the bed that could be used as a hiding spot. The man designed sleep like a military operation, and yet, despite it all, Domitian slept poorly. His dreams were often violent, fragmented. He once claimed to see a black dog at the foot of his bed each time someone plotted against him. Some nights he'd rise screaming, convinced his ancestors were whispering accusations. Quirky detail. He supposedly refused to sleep at night unless he'd walked in a perfect square beforehand, pacing exactly 44 steps each way, forming a mental box in which he felt temporarily safe. You see the indentations in the carpet where his feet have worn a visible path. It's both comical and tragic. Tonight, he's already performed the ritual. The pacing is done. He's stretched out now beneath a thick fur coverlet dagger tucked beneath the pillow. 2 bodyguards just outside the door. His breathing is shallow, and yet his eyes are open. He never fully closes them, you realize. Not until exhaustion forces them shut. You wonder, how do you fall asleep when you expect to die in your dreams? Historians still debate whether Domitian's paranoia was justified. After all, he was assassinated by members of his own court, including his chamberlain. So maybe he wasn't mad. Maybe he was just accurate. The chamber is silent. No musicians. No poets. Just one single nervous flute player far off in another wing of the palace, kept there to play lullabies through a brass funnel. Domitian found the direct sound of music too distracting. He preferred the echo. There are no statues here. He disliked being watched even by marble gods. And every night before lying down he demanded his sheets be lifted in front of him. Show me there's no blade beneath the fold. The bedding itself is Spartan. No dyes, no perfume. He believed color clouded judgment and scent dulled the mind. As you lie in the shadows, you notice something strange on his nightstand. Sits a wooden box. Inside, 6 small figurines carved from ivory, each one representing a senator. Some are missing heads. Domitian finally turns to his side, and for a moment you think he's asleep. Then he speaks soft as moth wings. Don't trust the quiet ones. The palace is quiet again, but warmer now. Curtains sway lazily in the night breeze, carrying with them the scent of jasmine and crushed citrus. You step into a richly appointed chamber, its walls painted in soft ochres and seafoam green, its ceilings covered in lazy frescoes of reclining gods. This is where Roman luxury reaches its peak. This is where you discover what it means to truly sleep like an emperor. Welcome to the evening routine of the elite imperial court, where snoozing in silk and sandals was not just accepted, it was a political statement. Tonight's sleeper. Not a specific ruler, but a composite, a collection of elite emperors whose lives blurred between power and plushness. Think of Lucius, Verus, Caracalla, Elagabalus. Those who believed a night's rest wasn't complete unless every sense was indulged, coddled, and massaged into submission. The bed in this chamber is enormous. Not a cot, not a couch, but a lectus cubicularis high off the ground, supported by carved lion paws, draped in dyed silk, and perfumed with rose petals scattered between the sheets. Yes, really. A pair of servants is arranging the pillows just so. One fluffs, the other scents them with cinnamon oil. The emperor reclines in a loose linen tunic, dyed Tyrian purple, a shade that legally no one else is allowed to wear. Even in sleep, the law follows you. Quirky tradition. Some emperors believed it was bad luck to lie on your left side, claiming it brought nightmares. So instead, they'd stack small silk rolls at their backs to keep them from turning over in the night. And slippers. Oh, yes. Not tossed beside the bed, but placed on a silver tray to be warmed by the brazier for when the emperor woke up and set feet to floor. Cold marble is for commoners. As you tiptoe across the mosaic floor, you notice the imperial bedtime snack waiting on a gold dish. Dates, almonds soaked in honeyed wine, and a small wedge of cheese cut precisely into the shape of a crescent moon. A servant once miscut it into a triangle and was demoted to chamber duty. Sleep in this room is slow, sensual. A lute hums softly from the next chamber, played by a musician kept specifically for the quiet hour. The music is tuned to a mode believed to slow the heartbeat and open the gates of hypnosis. But underneath the indulgence, there's still tension. The emperor may be perfumed, pampered, and lounging on a sea of imported fabric, but the dagger under the pillow remains, as always. Historians still debate whether such excess helped or hindered their rule. Did silk and sandals make them soft, or keep them sane? One scroll found in the ruins of a spa villa records an emperor saying, "Only when my toes are warm can I think clearly." You find yourself admiring the sheer dedication to comfort. The sleep schedule is as important as the war schedule. The physician prescribes 2 hours of dry heat, followed by a breeze from the window. If there's no breeze, someone fans manually. They have a man just for breeze. As the emperor finally lies back, head on a goose-down pillow, hands resting gently on the silk, the chamber dims. Slaves back away silent. One leaves a papyrus scroll under the pillow in case His Majesty wakes with an idea. You lie quietly beside this monument to opulence eyes following the painted stars on the ceiling. The faintest sound of wind chimes drifts in from a distant garden, and then from the emperor's lips half asleep. Did we change the pillows? The lavender was too forward yesterday. Tonight, you're not walking through palatial stone halls or past marble colonnades. You're pacing across soft carpets, the air heavy with incense and regret. Because this time sleep comes not in silence, but after a feast. A Roman one. You've stepped into a world where emperors go to bed bloated, blinking at torchlight, digesting more than food. Welcome to the twilight of indulgence, the land of feasting before bed, where emperors often dined like gods and dreamed like overstuffed lions. This evening, the emperor is reclining still, half on the triclinium couch, his stomach full, his toga a bit looser than usual. Wine glistens in goblets. Fig seeds cling to his lip. Musicians have been dismissed. The final course, a chilled honey custard, has been cleared. The post-banquet wobble has begun. The man in question, let's say Elagabalus, the infamous teen emperor of decadence, or perhaps Commodus, who reportedly enjoyed eating while watching blood sports. Regardless, the tradition remains Romans. Especially the elite didn't just eat at night, they worshipped it. A typical imperial banquet could last 4 hours and include more than 10 courses: oysters, dormice, stuffed with pine nuts, eels in mint sauce, flamingo tongues, and crusty loaves of honey-glazed bread. You sit nearby, imagining what digestion must be like when you've just swallowed half the Mediterranean. And yet, after all that, they slept. Or tried to. Quirky fact. Some emperors hired professional burpers. Yes, actual servants whose job it was to perform polite belches at the end of meals to symbolically release fullness and signal the transition to bedtime. Still, the connection between feast and sleep wasn't always peaceful. Ancient physicians warned that overeating before bed led to chaotic dreams and a wandering liver. One scroll even claims that dreams of falling are proof the stomach is boiling. Tonight, you're in a chamber where that theory plays out. The emperor, breathing heavily, groans slightly. A servant adjusts the cushion under his knees to aid digestion. Another offers a drop of vinegar water to settle the fish. Historians still argue whether these late-night indulgences were symbolic, showing Rome's power through the emperor's stomach, or simply the inevitable outcome of wealth without restraint. But some emperors tried to curb the damage. Marcus Aurelius, remember him. He often skipped dinner altogether, fearing sluggish dreams. He once wrote, "A glutton cannot meditate." Others, like Septimius Severus, only ate boiled vegetables at night and swore it helped him dream of ancestors instead of indigestion. You lean back against the wall now, watching the emperor drift toward sleep, his breath a little labored, a sheen of sweat on his brow. A brass basin waits nearby in case things reverse course, just in case. The bedding is thick, perhaps too warm for a belly this full. The man turns on his side, winces, then flips again. Somewhere in the palace, a water organ still hums, faintly forgotten after the guests left, and then he murmurs something. Soft, almost a whimper. A servant leans in, expecting a command. But no. The emperor is dreaming, eyes twitching, hands fidgeting as he relives the banquet. You hear it now. More eels. You're walking slower now, as if the very air is cautious. The palace around you is dim, not by design, but by neglect. Tapestries hang slightly askew. A torch sputters, and ahead at the end of a long corridor where shadows gather like rumors lies the chamber of Caligula. This is not a peaceful room. This is where you learn that some emperors did not fear sleeplessness, they thrived in it. Welcome to the night routine of a man so consumed by erratic energy and paranoia that rest became an act of aggression. Tonight's theme, sleepless in the Senate. You push open the heavy door to his private quarters. The first thing you notice, there are no windows. Just 4 marble walls, one of them covered in mirrors, the others hung with dark drapery. A single oil lamp burns, casting a nervous glow across the room. Caligula sits cross-legged on the floor, not the bed, muttering under his breath. His fingers twitch as if conducting an invisible orchestra. A silver dagger lies within reach, its hilt worn smooth from nervous handling. It's said that Caligula suffered from crippling insomnia. Suetonius reports that he could barely sleep more than a few minutes at a time, often jolting awake in a sweat, convinced he was being poisoned, or that his sister had come back from the dead. Whether madness caused his sleeplessness or vice versa, historians still argue. Quirky detail. He allegedly had entire nights scheduled for spontaneous Senate meetings, calling in half-asleep officials at 3 a.m., just to watch them fumble through scrolls. He said it gave him a strategic advantage. You stand near his bed, it's hardly used. Just a thin mattress draped in tiger skin, the pillow slightly scorched on one edge from a past oil lamp accident. A small wooden stool sits nearby, topped with grapes olives, and a scroll filled with insults, his own nighttime reading material. He wasn't alone either. Caligula often forced musicians, senators, even gladiators to stay awake with him, just to watch, to entertain, or to keep the voices at bay. He's pacing now barefoot, muttering Latin phrases. Occasionally he stops and whispers to the mirror. Is he rehearsing a speech, or answering someone only he sees? Outside the palace is quiet, but inside the tension sizzles. A servant enters and is immediately dismissed for blinking too loudly. Sleep is not expected here. It's the enemy. To close your eyes in Caligula's presence was to invite punishment or mockery. He once scrawled on a tablet, "Sleep is the cousin of death." Why should I greet either? And yet some nights even Caligula gave in. He'd collapse mid-rant onto the floor or bed. But even then his body remained coiled, as if he might leap up and declare war on the moon. Tonight, though, you witness something rare. The pacing slows. He sits. The dagger remains in hand, but his eyes are heavier now. He mutters one last phrase, "If I sleep, don't wake me unless Rome is burning." And then, eyes half-lidded, he slouches back into the tiger skin, still dressed one sandal on one off. The flame dims, and Caligula, the emperor who declared himself a god and appointed his horse a senator, sleeps at last. The night deepens, and now you're walking not through palaces or villas, but along a quiet corridor lined with scrolls. The scent here is warm, parchment-worn leather, and something faintly metallic, perhaps ink or discipline itself. You've arrived at the bedchamber of Trajan Rome's most respected soldier-emperor, and unlike Caligula's twitchy shadows or Nero's decadent velvet, this space feels balanced. This is where you'll learn how empires are maintained by law and lullabies. Tonight's theme, the lullaby of law. Trajan's quarters are neat, predictably neat. A small oil lamp flickers near a tidy writing desk. The bed is simple, but solid, made of dark olive wood, with a thin wool mattress and a single folded blanket. There's no luxury here, but there is order, a kind of rest that grows from structure. You pause beside the desk. A wax tablet is open, half filled with notes on provincial governors and grain shipments. A stylus rests beside it, ready for one last memo. Trajan believed in sleeping, prepared his mind, calmed not by incense or lullabies, but by reading legal cases. Each night he would scan reports from across the empire, complaints, petitions, disputes. His aides called it bedside bureaucracy. Quirky fact, Trajan had a personal rule: never fall asleep with an unanswered petition on the desk. One night in Syria, it's said he delayed sleep by 4 hours because he couldn't decide whether a particular fish tax law should apply to dried anchovies. You hear the rustle of fabric. Now he's entering the chamber, already dressed in a plain linen tunic, hair damp from a quick wash. No attendance. Just a single trusted scribe dismissed with a respectful nod. He sits on the bed and reaches for a scroll. Not poetry, not philosophy, a legal treatise on inheritance disputes. Sleep for Trajan came not after battle, but after clarity. If the empire was stable, if the roads were patrolled, if the bridges held, and the taxes flowed, then, and only then, would he allow himself to rest. Historians often marvel at how consistently functional Trajan was. His reign was marked by expansion infrastructure and quiet competence. But they still debate whether his nighttime habits were healthy or obsessive. Was he building Rome, or hiding from silence? The chamber grows darker. The lamp flickers its flame steady. Outside, a dog barks once in the distance. A slave walks the hallway barefoot, checking that the emperor's water basin is cool, that no pests have entered through the shutters. The bed itself is humble. No frills, just thick linen and a single goose feather pillow. He lies down flat on his back, arms crossed over his chest, not in morbidity, but in calm. There's something soothing about the rhythm of a man who knows his limits. Tonight, he murmurs a final note to himself, something about Sicily and temple funds, and then blows out the lamp. Darkness falls, and you realize this is what peace sounds like. No pacing, no guards peeking through secret windows, just a man asleep beside the scrolls that shaped an empire. You step softly now through corridors less defined by stone than by smoke and echoes. There's incense in the air, heavy and sweet, with a sharp undercurrent of burnt resin. The walls are draped in deep red, and faint chanting filters in from a distant temple. Tonight, you're not just entering a bedroom. You're entering a ritual. This is the sacred space of emperors who believed in divine imitation. This is where you'll experience napping like a god. The emperor here might be Aurelian, the stern restorer of Roman borders, or perhaps Elagabalus, the self-styled high priest of the sun god. Either way, what matters tonight is the ancient act of ritual sleep, where slumber wasn't merely rest, but a bridge between mortals and gods. The chamber is circular, its ceiling domed like a miniature sky. Candles burn in symmetrical rings, and the emperor lies not in a bed, but on a raised platform of gold-threaded fabric centered like an altar. He is barefoot, perfumed, and surrounded by votive offerings, bowls of milk, lotus petals, and even figurines of sleeping lions. This is no accident. Quirky fact. Some emperors engaged in temple naps, a practice borrowed from Greek Asclepions. Sacred sleep spaces where one sought divine visions. They would lie down in a consecrated area fast beforehand and await messages from the gods in their dreams. Rome, of course, made it grander. Tonight, the emperor wears only a thin white tunic and a gold amulet etched with Jupiter's thunderbolt. His eyelids flutter not from sleep, but from preparation. A priest stands nearby softly chanting from a scroll. A young acolyte sprinkles rosewater across the floor in a spiral. Sleep must arrive with meaning. Otherwise, what's the point? You ease into the corner of the room. Everything here is designed for stillness. No wind, no creaking floors, no casual conversation. Even the fire crackles in slow rhythm like breath. Historians still argue whether this ritual sleep was religious ecstasy or theatrical politics. Did emperors believe they communed with gods, or did they simply want others to believe it? Perhaps both. One record speaks of Caracalla dreaming of Serapis, the Greco-Egyptian god of healing, who told him to drink from a particular spring. The emperor built a shrine there the next week. Another tale claims Hadrian once saw Antinous in a vision glowing with divine light and declared him a god upon waking. As you watch tonight's emperor settle into stillness, the flame of the last candle flickers and dies. The room dims. The priest steps back silent now. The emperor exhales deeply, arms stretched slightly outward, as if awaiting the wings of Mercury to lift him into another realm. You find yourself unsure whether you're witnessing a bedtime or a transformation. And then in the stillness, the emperor speaks. Just one phrase, almost a whisper. Let no one disturb the gods tonight. And he closes his eyes. The night is deeper now, ink black and pulseless. You move quietly along a narrower passage walls lined not with frescoes or columns, but with doors. Heavy oak reinforced with iron, not decorative, protective. The air feels careful. This is not the Rome of temples or marble statues. This is the Rome of soft conspiracies and silent warnings. Tonight you are stepping into the hush of whispers in the dark. Here you'll witness the unseen labor of sleep, not the emperors drifting off, but the invisible machines making their slumber possible. This is the world of chamberlains, night servants, eunuchs, concubines, and whispering guards. These were the people who managed the rituals of imperial rest, performing silent tasks at precise intervals to ensure that their emperor might rest a few hours without being killed. You slip into the private chamber of Septimius Severus, a man whose sleep routine was closer to a tactical maneuver than a ritual. His room is dark, but not empty. A slave kneels by the door, eyes wide open, listening for movement in the hallway. 2 more sit at the foot of the bed, back straight, not even allowed to lean. Their job: to wake the emperor gently if needed, and to disappear when not. Quirky fact: Roman emperors sometimes employed ear whisperers, trusted aides, trained to speak information into their master's ear during sleep transitions. Names, updates, coded phrases. The theory: the subconscious would absorb strategy while the body rested. Tonight, a female servant approaches the emperor's bed. She kneels and murmurs softly in Latin the latest from Egypt, the grain shipment from Carthage, the unrest in Gaul. Severus twitches, but does not wake. He has trained his body to hear without responding. And over there, see that a wooden stool with iron studs. It's not furniture, it's a safety marker. If the stool has been moved half an inch in the night, it means someone entered the chamber. No one's allowed to move it, but the emperor himself. Historians still debate whether this network of sleep rituals made emperors feel safe or just more aware of their fragility. Were the whispered briefings a form of control or evidence of permanent unrest? In another palace, Diocletian demanded that every candle be lit in a precise sequence. If the 4th candle flickered first, the chamber was considered spiritually compromised. On those nights, he refused to sleep at all. And what of sedatives? Yes, they used them. Poppy syrup, mulled wine. Sometimes a paste of valerian and crushed rose petals rubbed into the temples. But many emperors preferred ritual over remedy. Trust was harder to drink than wine. You watch Severus now, lying still beneath a thin wool blanket, eyes closed, but brows furrowed. A eunuch steps forward to check the coals in the brazier. Another wipes a small smudge from the edge of the silver goblet. Nothing is out of place, and yet everything is tensed. Even in sleep, this chamber feels alert. You can almost hear the gears turning, the muttered prayers, the watching eyes, the blades hidden in boots just outside the door. Finally, the emperor exhales. Not a sigh of relief, a signal. The slave nearest the curtain leans forward and whispers. The lions have not stirred, and the room as one relaxes, but no one dares sleep. Tonight, you're not alone in the emperor's room. Not really. Because even when the bed is warm, the lamps are lit, and the guards are posted, something else lingers in the dark. Something Rome never quite understood, never could explain, but always feared. Tonight's story is about nocturnal omens. You step carefully into a bedchamber that smells of myrrh, laurel, and damp marble. The fire is low. The drapery has been tied back to let in the cool night breeze. The emperor sleeps with one hand resting gently on a dagger, and both eyes shut too tightly. This chamber could belong to Claudius, or Antoninus Pius, or perhaps even Valerian before his capture. It doesn't matter. Tonight, it belongs to the emperor, haunted by symbols, by signs that sleep would not silence. The room is quiet, until it isn't. You hear the hoot of an owl outside. The flame of a candle flickers unnaturally left then right. A dog howls in the street, and somewhere, though you're sure the doors are closed, there's the faint sound of dripping water. It shouldn't drip. The basin is dry. You glance at the emperor's bedside table. Laid across it are protective charms, a tooth from a lion cub, a coin with Janus, etched twice a folded scroll tied with red string, and most unsettling, a dried bat wing sealed in wax. These aren't decorations. They are defenses. Quirky belief. Romans feared that dreams could be messages or warnings, and many emperors slept in chambers that had been ritually cleansed each evening, sprinkled with water from 7 fountains, smoked with burned olive leaves, and sealed with a whispered charm at the doorframe. Historians still argue whether these omens truly influenced decisions, but the records say that more than one campaign was delayed or launched because of a vision of blood in the bathwater or a thunderclap at midnight. Tonight's emperor shifts uneasily in bed. His lips move. He mutters a name, then another. Then he breathes in sharply, eyes flying open. His hand goes to his chest, then the dagger, then back to the pillow. You see it now, sleep is not rest here. It is vigilance in disguise. The omens aren't just outside the window. They are inside him, Inherited, learned, embedded. Some nights the emperor dreams of fire, others of a wolf circling his bed. One scroll faded and half-burned records an emperor who woke each night at the same moment, 31 a.m. without fail. On the 9th night he died in his sleep. You feel a chill move through the room. The flame of the lamp bends sideways again. The owl hoots twice now, and still the emperor lies there, unmoving, waiting. A priest once told him, if the birds speak thrice, you must not sleep again before dawn. He didn't, and neither will you. Now the air grows denser still, scented with oil and incense, but touched with something sour, metallic, uneasy. You move through a hall padded in silence, stepping past half-glimpsed statues and wall sconces that seem deliberately dim. You're not walking into luxury tonight or ceremony. You're entering the fragile twilight of the human mind. Because this room doesn't hold an emperor in control. Tonight's sleep is a battleground, and we're here to witness royal sleep disorders. The chamber you step into is modest by imperial standards, just a bed, a bronze water basin, and a single ivory figurine of Minerva perched above the headboard. But it's the way the bedding is rumpled, the way the lamp has been knocked over and hastily set upright, that tells you this is no ordinary rest. Let's talk about Claudius. Scholars love to debate him. Was he a brilliant administrator in disguise, or merely tolerated by those who thought him weak? But they agree on this. Claudius likely suffered from parasomnias, a spectrum of sleep-related disorders that might include sleepwalking night terrors and sudden vocal outbursts. Historical sources describe him wandering the palace at night, muttering commands to invisible senators, or shouting from his bed as if presiding over a trial. He would sometimes sleep in full tunic sandals included just in case he woke on the battlefield. And then there's Augustus Rome's first emperor, who reportedly suffered from vivid, almost prophetic dreams. His physician recommended sleeping facing east to align with Apollo, but this didn't stop the trembling. He often woke, convinced of earthquakes crying out that the gods are speaking too loudly tonight. Quirky detail. Some emperors had dream catchers. Not the woven circles you're imagining, but elaborate wall hangings, embroidered with protective prayers, geometric charms, and even tiny bronze bells. The idea was to confuse bad spirits as they entered, making them forget their task and leave the dreamer in peace. You glance at the hanging in this room. Now it's faded with threadbare tassels but still intact. It sways slightly in the stale air. Historians still debate whether these disorders were medical or moral. Was Claudius plagued by epilepsy? Was Augustus hallucinating from the stress of statecraft? Or were these episodes part of Rome's own mythology, its desperate need to make even its weaknesses symbolic? You look to the bed again. Claudius lies there, but not quietly. His fingers twitch. His jaw trembles. He whispers phrases in Greek, then Latin, then nonsense. He turns suddenly and grabs the side of the mattress. You can tell he's not dreaming with the gods. He's arguing with them. You approach softly to watch closer, and that's when his eyes fly open. They don't focus. For a moment, he looks directly through you. Then he sits up and shouts, "The census must include ghosts." A servant rushes in, bows silently, and pours him a glass of lukewarm water. Claudius blinks, takes it, sips once, and lies back down without another word. You remain still as stone. The air grows quiet again. But you know better now the mind of an emperor doesn't sleep. It replays. It fragments. It distorts. And when it's trapped in a gilded box of expectations, alliances, and assassins, well, even sleep becomes dangerous. You glance once more at the Minerva figurine above the bed. She's watching him, but she's not helping. You walk now into a chamber that feels theatrical. The torches burn brighter here, the drapes are trimmed in gold, and there's a faint whiff of myrrh and cinnamon in the air. But something feels off, not frightening, just strange. Because tonight you're about to explore something both intimate and oddly performative. Tonight's theme, the politics of pajamas. You wouldn't think nightwear could sway an empire, but here in the personal quarters of emperors like Lucius Verus Commodus, and later the eccentric Elagabalus, clothing wasn't just daytime armor, it carried weight even as they slept. You pause by a dressing stool. Laid out for the evening is a linen tunic so fine it's translucent under torchlight, and beside it, a pair of ceremonial sandals decorated with tiny moonstone beads and lined with sheepskin. A folded headband rests beside them, embroidered with the phrase, "In rest I reign." That's not a metaphor. It's an edict. You see, in later Roman society, emperors knew that image never slept. Even in private, their clothing, bedding, and posture were carefully curated because news of what the emperor wore to bed spread. Quirky tidbit Caligula reportedly slept in women's nightwear to confuse the gods and summon stranger dreams. Whether this was spiritual strategy, a twisted sense of humor, or something else entirely, well, historians still argue. Others, like Septimius Severus, slept in a sleeveless tunic and bronze-plated slippers, insisting it reminded the body of duty. One court document even notes that he banned overly soft nightcaps because they encouraged laziness. Tonight, the emperor. Let's imagine Elagabalus is preparing for bed in a long purple gown, hair perfumed and braided. Servants tie gold thread at the sleeves, not for comfort, but because it leaves creases in the skin. In the morning, those marks prove that no one disturbed his sleep. No meetings, no whispers. Yes, sleep had branding, and fashion could become political theater. One account tells of an emperor who publicly switched from purple to plain wool sleep robes, signaling a return to modesty. Senators wept. Others rolled their eyes. But the message was received. And there were accessories. Nighttime rings carved with protective prayers. Sleep satchels, tiny pouches filled with herbs, amulets, or messages from astrologers. Some emperors wore custom eye masks not for comfort, but as symbols of divine blindness. I sleep, but see what mortals cannot. You glance around the room and see them rows of sandals in descending size, a cabinet of ceremonial sleepwear embroidered with planetary glyphs, a jar of imported Nubian sleep ointment said to invite dreams shaped like stars. Historians still debate whether these bedtime performances were sincere acts of belief, quiet rebellion, or just another form of imperial control. But tonight, the emperor reclines with great flair, the silk bedding practically sculpted around him. He gestures to a servant to adjust the folds at his ankles, then closes his eyes carefully as if posing for a painting. You think he's asleep. Then his voice slices through the dark. Make sure they tell the Senate I chose the silver robe tonight. The palace is quieter now. Not peaceful, never that, but quieter. The kind of silence that weighs on your shoulders, as if even the walls are holding their breath. Tonight, you're stepping beyond the drapery and into a secret realm where beds don't just hold bodies, they hold power. Tonight's theme, beds as power symbols. The room you enter doesn't feel like a bedroom. It feels like a throne room laid flat. High ceilings, thick red velvet panels muffling every sound. A bed, if you can call it that, positioned on a raised dais, flanked by 2 golden lamps. The mattress itself is embroidered with imperial eagles. The sheets carry stitched quotes from Virgil and Livy. The pillows are dyed Tyrian purple. You are in the sleeping chamber of Caracalla, or perhaps Gallienus, or even Constantine in his later years. Men who understood that where and how you slept could send a message as powerful as any edict. Because in Rome, the bed was political real estate. It's where alliances were made, treaties whispered, and betrayals, well, gently plotted. There's a throne nearby, not for the emperor, but for those granted midnight audiences. A select few were invited to these post-curtain meetings, where decisions were made, in the vulnerable space between wakefulness and dreams. Quirky fact. Some emperors kept 2 beds in their chamber, one for sleep, the other for appearances. One was used. The other was seen by visitors, foreign envoys, or carefully arranged witnesses who would report back, he sleeps like a god. Stagecraft at its most intimate. Even the position of the bed mattered. North-facing suggested alignment with destiny. South-facing whispered of sensuality. Some rulers had their beds shifted nightly, claiming it threw off any magical assassins trying to dream their way in. You pass the foot of the bed now. A basin of rose water sits beside a golden scroll tube. It contains petitions, yes, but also names. Every night the emperor would read a few. Not aloud. Just once. Just enough to remember who he trusted, and who he didn't. Historians still debate whether the imperial bedchamber was more powerful than the Senate floor. Think about it, legislation passed by day could be undone by a single whispered promise in the dark. Here the pillow is strategy, the blanket diplomacy, the silence an audience. Even in relationships the bed mattered. Marriage to an emperor meant visibility, and visibility meant power. You'd be seen lying beside him. Or not. That absence could whisper more loudly than any decree. Some emperors like Domitian enforced rules about who could even enter their sleep space. Others, like Elagabalus, blurred those lines until scandal became policy. You imagine the emperor now reclining, eyes half closed, one hand trailing across the embossed design of his bedframe. He knows that messengers are outside pretending not to listen. He knows that his silence tonight may ignite or delay a war tomorrow, and so he lies perfectly still, not asleep, just visible. The torchlight flickers against the golden fabric above him, making it look like he's floating in amber. And then, just as your eyes adjust, he turns and murmurs, "This bed has more power than 1,000 swords. That's why I never truly leave it. The air in this chamber is heavier, slower somehow, as though sound and scent are sinking into the walls. Candles burn lower than usual. The incense smells different. Resinous, bitter, touched by something old. You've entered the final room. This is the place where power ends, where breath slows, and where silence finally wins. Tonight's theme, deathbeds and legacies. You stand now beside the last resting place of emperors, some noble, some tyrannical, all finally still. This is not one emperor's room. It's many. Because while Rome had hundreds of rulers, they all met the same closing scene, a bed, a final breath, and a legacy no longer theirs to control. You begin with Augustus, who reportedly died in his wife Livia's arms, whispering, "Have I played the part well?" Then applaud as I exit. You picture the bed, simple, clean sunlight slanting in as the most calculated man in Roman history, slipped into shadow with a line rehearsed like a curtain call. Others were less tidy. Tiberius, for instance, was declared dead prematurely until he suddenly woke up and sat upright in bed. A guard, unsure what to do, smothered him with a pillow. Was that murder a favor historians still argue? Historians still. And then there's Caligula, no deathbed at all, just blood and marble. But here in this chamber, we imagine what should have been a disturbed man, whispering to the walls, folding silk sheets as if they were allies. Tonight, the room belongs to Hadrian. Old, sick, and deeply tired. He hated that he could no longer walk his gardens. His final days were spent propped on pillows reciting half verses of poetry and demanding updates on construction projects he would never see finished. On the night he died, he reportedly murmured, "Animula vagula blandula, little soul, you drifting thing." You look to the bed. His hand rests on a scroll. The last one. Unread. Quirky detail. Romans sometimes placed coins beneath the bed of a dying emperor, believing it helped the soul pay Charon, the ferryman of the underworld. Others tied red cords around the wrist to anchor the spirit until all last words had been spoken. In this room, someone still believed in ritual. The walls are lined with memories, busts of ancestors' prayers etched into bronze, a faint mark where a priest once sprinkled water. A senator stands just outside the door, already composing the funeral speech in his head. You realize the emperor lying here is no longer ruling, he is being interpreted. And what about those who died far from home? Trajan passed away on campaign, his death kept secret until his ashes returned. The bed he died in, likely a camp cot. No marble, no perfumed sheets, just a shivering breeze off the sea. Some, like Valerian, never had a bed at all. Captured by enemies, he died in exile, perhaps kneeling, perhaps not even that. And yet, in every case, Rome gave them a bed later. Statues, tombs, shrines. They gave them back the sleep they lost in life. You walk around the chamber now. The bedding is undisturbed. The candles are lower. The flame no longer fights the dark. The emperor breathes once more, then stops. And all at once the empire moves on without him. The palace is quieter than it has ever been. There are no footsteps tonight. No murmurs. No birds. Only you and the slow hush of history settling down. You pass through the final chamber, one less a room than a reflection, a mirror held up to everything you've seen. The flickering torchlight softens as you cross the threshold. The walls are unadorned now. The sheets are folded. The stories have slowed. Tonight's theme. Did any of them sleep well? You stand in a symbolic room, one that doesn't belong to Augustus, or Nero, or Constantine. It belongs to the idea of the Roman emperor. That god-man hybrid, half worshipped, half feared. A human swaddled in silk and marble and anxiety. And the question still lingers with all the power in the world. Did any of them ever truly rest? You look around. The bed here is perfectly made but empty. The pillow is plump. The blankets are tucked. There's a scroll laid neatly at the side table blank. Because the truth is, none of their sleep habits, whether strict or theatrical, herbal or divine, could protect them from the restlessness of rule. Quirky observation. Several emperors built elaborate sleep temples only to die in them. Others spent fortunes importing dream-inducing herbs, or orchestrated bedtime rituals so complex they lasted longer than the sleep they were meant to encourage. Some prayed to Mercury for peace, others to Apollo for prophecy, still others to Neptune, asking the tides to quiet the pounding in their heads. Historians continue to debate it all, who slept well, who didn't, whether their recorded habits were genuine, or propaganda designed to make emperors seem pious, disciplined, or mysterious. But one thing seems certain: none of them could afford to fall too deeply asleep. To rest, truly rest, was to become vulnerable. To stop calculating. To stop listening. To stop fearing. And for most emperors, that was simply not an option. So they lingered in the half-state. One eye always half open. One ear always bent to the floor. Always listening for footsteps, whispers, the hiss of steel, or the silence that follows betrayal. The stories told of Roman power are loud of conquest, oration, and decadence. But in this final chamber, what remains is the quiet and the weight that comes from never knowing if you'll wake up as emperor or not at all. You lie down in that imagined bed now, and in your mind the sounds of sandals in the hall begin to fade. You feel the cool linen on your skin. You see moonlight curve against polished bronze, and you wonder. If you had the whole empire, every army, every coin, every whispered prayer in the temples, would you sleep any better? The silence answers, maybe for a night, but probably not. And now, as we leave the marble halls and oil-lit corridors of ancient Rome behind, let your thoughts soften. The empires, the sandals, the whispering slaves, the shifting shadows, all of it can fade now like a dream already half forgotten. Let the footsteps recede. Let the torches burn down to quiet embers. No more names to remember. No more timelines. No more scrolls or generals or omens to interpret. Just stillness. In this moment, there is no throne, no senate, no duty, only the gentle breath of night and the cool hush of sleep as it draws near. Maybe you're reclining now like Marcus Aurelius wrapped in a worn blanket on a hillside tent. Maybe you're listening for wind chimes like Hadrian, or hearing distant bells echo from a temple far from the city's noise. Wherever your mind has wandered, let it settle now, like parchment curling beside a candle's last flicker. Let your muscles loosen, your jaw release. Let the silence deepen, because history doesn't need you right now. The empire can wait. Tonight, it is enough to lie still, to listen to the soft murmur of the fan, the blanket's weight, the tiny familiar sounds of your own space, to drift, and maybe, just maybe, to sleep like an emperor once wished he could.